Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. I sure hope you brought your coffee because we're drawing near to the conclusion now. So, if you can't keep your eyes open any longer, scare yourself into alertness with the next chapter of Doughboy420's Dreamscape, Part 4, The Prisoner.
I had traveled through the dream world, through the dreamscape. I had walked down a familiar road within the world of colors that existed inside, yet out of space, hovering there without motion. I had seen the orbs filled with dreams, dreams that were corrupted by the shadow things, the things in my dreams. No, the things in all of our dreams. The things that create our nightmares, the amorphous beasts that manipulate our very fears into this reality. At the end of the road was the house, the old mansion that started this all. The mansion we were in the middle of cleaning out looked brand new in this world, freshly built, freshly painted. I heard screaming, a muffled moaning and screaming of pain from within the walls of the house. I found myself curious. I had to know what was happening here, what was happening to me. I found myself thinking of the old saying, "Curiosity killed the cat," as I reached for the doorknob, but I ignored my better judgment and pushed onward. I opened the door and peered inside. Within the house, I saw not a comfy home, but a dark, pitch-black cave. The screaming continued, now able to be more clearly heard. It was familiar screaming, screaming from the beast, the prisoner within the book, that thing with appendages without reason, that thing with tentacles and many eyes and mouths. The creature within the pages of that wretched book was screaming. It was trapped somewhere within this cave, surely chained to that boulder, surrounded by everlasting fire. He was suffering. He needed me. I needed to move forward. I needed to help. Go. Move. I turned and looked back at the world of colors for a short moment, taking in its beauty and staring in awe at its very existence. I then turned and stepped into the darkness of the cave within the old house, a cave that existed outside of any rhyme or reason. But I had to continue. I had to find him. I had to find that prisoner bound to the stone. He needed me. He needed me. I needed to find him. I needed to move forward, deeper into the cave. I stepped into the cave, and the door slammed shut behind me, causing me to jump with a startle, snapping me out of the trance that I again had been lured into. I was now afraid. I was in complete darkness within the cave. I turned around to grab the handle for the door, desperately wanting to get out of this place, but where the handle should have been, I found nothing. In fact, I found nothing at all. No door, no wall, nothing. Just the cave all around me. The only sounds that could be heard from within the cave were the sounds of drops of water falling from the cave's ceiling into puddles upon the cave's floor, and the sound of breathing. my breathing. My terrified breathing echoing throughout the cave. I no longer heard the screaming of the beast, aside from the sounds of water droplets and my breath. There was nothing. Just silence. I took a step forward, and even the sound of my footsteps sounded louder as they reverberated off the cave's walls. It created a kind of amplification, like a dark and abysmal amphitheater. I took another step, and again it was amplified. Then I took another, and another. I ventured deeper and deeper into the cave, unable to see even my hand inches from my face. It was as if I were blind with an acute sense of hearing within the deafeningly silent cave. It was then that I was hit with a breeze. Not a cold breeze, but like a breeze on a hot day. The kind of breeze that blows the heat into you and fills your lungs with dry air instead of comforting you and cooling you down. With the air came the smell that had been haunting me for days, the smell without a source, the smell of rotting meat, like decaying flesh. But there was something else this time. This time, it had a slightly different odor, but I could not quite put my finger on it. The smell of decay and death filled my nostrils. It was as if something had died and was left baking out in the sun. But the cave was complete darkness. There was no sun here. Where's the smell coming from? What the hell is it? I found myself nearly gagging from the aroma that filled the air, and as I pressed onward, it grew more thick. The disgusting scent was soon so strong that I began to taste it upon my tongue, nearly causing me to vomit. It smelled so putrid, so vile. I pressed onward, feeling sicker with each step, and with each step, the temperature also rose. It began to get hotter and hotter. I began to sweat, and the odor of my body mixed with the pungent odor within the cave, mixing to form a new, nearly vomit-inducing smell. I moved forward, ever forward, ever onward. I had to keep going. I had to. The breeze that carried the heat and smell also grew stronger. I could feel it blowing my hair back even more, and I could feel the air booming against my eardrums. It wasn't a constant breeze. It seemed to come in intervals. The wind would come quickly, and then it would suddenly stop, leaving everything silent again. This was maddening. Silence followed by loud, booming wind, along with a feverish heat and an odor that would cause those with weak stomachs to vomit. Believe me, it was taking me every bit of my strength to fight back the urge. Soon, I seen a light at the end of the darkness. It was like a small, red eye staring back at me. It looked so much like an eye at first glance that it's what I thought it was. The eye of some cyclopean beast staring back at me, but no, it was a crimson light at the end of the tunnel. Surely the exit to the cave, and surely the source of the heat and the wind. But what was emanating this red light? I walked toward the light, and it got bigger, closer, and ever closer. The heat was now nearly unbearable, and the smell made my eyes water. It made snot run out of my nostrils and made my nose burn. It was so strong that I thought I lost my ability to smell. It burned my nose so bad, but I was wrong, unfortunately. I would have rather lost my ability to smell than to inhale the aroma any further. I stumbled. I fell to my knees on the hard, wet stone of the cave's floor. It hurt, but I didn't care because I was clenching my stomach. The odor was so strong and so vile that it was causing me physical pain. I could no longer keep it in. I keeled over and began to vomit upon the cave floor. I lost every bit of the contents of my stomach as the smell attempted to kill my senses, as it attempted to kill me. I threw up until there was nothing left. Nothing but dry heaves followed, causing gut-wrenching pain in my stomach. I clenched my stomach tighter and began to feel dizzy. I had to go on. I had to continue. I had to. I can't. I slumped over and fell onto my side, partially laying in my own pool of vomit, mixing with the water upon the cave floor. I could go no further. Am I going to die here? I thought, as I stared at the red eye, the red light so far away. I began to lose my senses, and the light began to dim. Was I dying? Why? Why me? I thought, as I began to feel myself drift away. It was then that I felt them again. The hands that pulled me into this world. They again wrapped themselves around my body, and I could feel myself being lifted up off the ground. I looked around, but could still see nothing. Only darkness. I then looked back at the crimson light and seen it slowly getting bigger and bigger. It was getting closer and closer. I was being carried toward the exit of this cave. I could no longer smell or taste anything. The odor within the cave had burned away those senses, leaving me fearing that they would never return. But I had more pressing matters at the moment. I was being carried by unseen hands within the darkness toward a burning light. The heat was getting more and more intense, along with the wind that came from the opening. What was happening? Is this an oven? Am I being cooked? I thought to myself. I began to scream. Stop! Please stop! Put me down! Please! I can't take the heat! You're killing me! But the hands did not stop. I was carried ever closer and closer. The opening was now very clear and very close. Within the circle of the opening, I could see a flickering of the light, like the flickering of a fire. Was this the fire from the book? The fire that surrounds the beast? I asked myself. Then that means that smell. The smell of decaying, charred, burning flesh. I continued. I quickly came to the realization that the source of the heat was the fire from the book, and the smell was the odor of the beast's flesh being slowly burned away, leaving it to bleed and rot. In the light emanating from the cave's fiery eye, I could see the walls of the cave more clearly now. I could see the water trickling down its walls and pooling on the floor, but it was not water. It was blood. The cave's walls and ceilings were bleeding, and I'd been moving through it this entire time. The light then shone upon me, and I looked around. I could not see the hands that held on to me. They were phantom hands. However, I did see myself. I was drenched in blood. I was covered in a dark crimson. I had been laying in blood and vomit before I was lifted up by these unseen appendages. The blood dripped from my body, and I was carried away closer to the burning eye. I was still struggling against the binding hands, but it was of no use. They were not letting go. I was drenched in blood and my own sweat. It was so hot. So hot. The doorway of the cave grew larger, and I was soon mere yards away. It was then that the hands released me, and I fell onto my back on the ground. I hit with a loud thud and laid there for a moment. My back was in severe pain from the drop, and I thought something had been damaged. Luckily, I was not paralyzed. Then it returned. The screaming. The familiar screaming. I was startled when it returned. It caused me to jump, sending a jolt of pain down my spine. The screaming was now very loud and very clear. It was the beast. the prisoner from the book. He was yelling and screaming in pain, eternally damned to be bound to the stone within a ring of ever-burning fires. The prisoner must be somewhere past the eye, within the deeper caverns of this place. I slowly climbed to my feet, pushing myself up off the ground, fighting against the pulsating wind against me, struggling to keep the wind from pushing me back onto the ground. The wind was now quicker. It came in shorter intervals. I had to be close to its source. I had to be close to the origin of the wind, smell, and heat within the cave. It had to be just up ahead. I pushed forward and walked slowly toward the eye, the doorway lit by fire beyond it. I made my way to the doorway and found myself standing at the edge of a precipice. A great, deep gorge within the cavern that fell hundreds of feet down. I gazed over the cliff's edge and stared down into the pit, down to the fires that raged below. It was like a volcano. There was magma flowing from within this place. Beneath me the cave curved around to the right, and I could not see what was beyond it, but I could tell that this is where the screaming originated. That is where I would find him. That is where I had to go. Where I must go. Must go. I noticed the pathway that hugged the left side of the chasm and wound down the pit toward the bottom. This was my way down. I moved toward the wall and stayed as close as possible to avoid falling to a fiery death. I made my way slowly downward, very leery of the crumbling pathway beneath me. I feared it could fall out from under me at any moment. Luckily, the path held true and allowed me safe passage to the bottom of the gorge. The heat was unbearable, and I again felt as if I were dying. I was sweating buckets, but my perspiration would evaporate as soon as it left my pores. I was dehydrating, and now the extreme heat was making me feel sick to my stomach. Then I saw them. The fires. The fires that raged around the stone. The stone and the beast. There he was. There he was, bound in all of his magnificence, his splendor, his punishment. The beast towered over me like a tall column of a body, spotted with 1,000,000 arms and legs and eyes and teeth. He had wings that sprouted from every which way, including 2 very large ones at his shoulders, all of them flapping, creating the wind that pulsated through the cave. This was the source of all of it. I could see his eyes about his invertebrate head, crying blood, crying like the book, crying like the clowns. I watched as the fires burned away his skin. I watched his charred flesh fall to the ground beneath him, tentacles, arms, and legs, all dropping to the ground in a pile of putrid embers. Once the flesh upon the ground was extinguished, it appeared to crawl back to his body, slithering across the ground like a large slug and lurching its way up his body to reattach itself to him, forming a new body part to be burned away. His appendages and tentacles writhed in pain, thrashing about and all around. He now screamed from his many mouths scattered about his amorphous body, each mouth with a different tone, each mouth a different language, all screaming out in sync, all screaming like a twisted chorus of anguish. I looked upon him, and I could feel him begging me, pleading to me. He needed my help. He needed me. I had to help him. I walked forward toward a cliff that stood over top of the ever-raging fires, extending into the blazing ring near to where the monster resided. He towered over me, and his many arms reached for me, but the chains that held him to the stone prevented him from grabbing hold. I looked up at him, and he down at me. I could feel his very power within me. I felt as if I were being possessed. I felt stronger, more powerful, yet I also felt myself weaker, more frail. I heard within my head. He spoke directly into my mind. I panicked for a moment, my heart racing, beating out of my chest. My chest hurt. I felt as though I were having a heart attack. Everything seemed more vivid, more real. I began to hear the voice again in my head, begging me for help, pleading in a million voices, requesting in 1,000 languages, some current, some long dead and forgotten. Yet, I understood them all. He needed help, and I had to help him. He asked again. Yes, I replied to him. It was then that I seen a blinding white light fill the area. The light was followed by a deafening, thunderous crack, a crack that I could feel like a shockwave reverberating throughout the caverns and piercing into me, breaking through my soul, puncturing my life, my being. I didn't know what was happening. It was like reality itself had shattered around me. Is this the end? I asked myself. Is this what it's like to die? I continued. I found myself quickly weakening, and I was unable to hold on any longer. Was the last thing I heard before my eyes rolled back into my head, and I passed out.
I suppose in the world of dreams, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So, maybe staying awake forever is the only option left. But, if the Ancient Ones try to pull you away, tell them you must be back by next weekend as we deliver the exciting conclusion to this epic tale. Until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.